This story contains themes of mystery and suspense that some listeners may find unsettling. Listener discretion is advised. The silence in those woods wasn't natural. It was heavy, not the peaceful quiet of nature, but the kind that pressed down on you, absorbing sound, making your own heartbeat echo in your ears. Michael felt it the moment they stepped out of their car, the gravel crunching under his boots like a sacrilege against the profound stillness. His girlfriend, Emily, had shivered, pulling her cardigan tighter despite the crisp, autumn air that had just begun to turn the leaves to fire. They'd driven 6 hours from the city, chasing the promise of solitude, a cabin advertised online as a rustic retreat, nestled deep in the Appalachian foothills. No Wi-Fi, spotty cell service, just them and the whispering pines. It was exactly what they thought they needed. Michael, a software engineer perpetually tethered to his laptop, and Emily, a graphic designer constantly battling deadlines, were desperate for a digital detox, a chance to reconnect. The cabin itself was a marvel of aged wood and forgotten charm. A stone fireplace dominated the main living area, its hearth blackened with countless fires. Sunlight streamed through dusty windows, illuminating motes dancing in the air like tiny, forgotten spirits. There was a faint smell of pine and something else. Something old like dried leaves and forgotten paper. It wasn't unpleasant, but it added to the sense of stepping back in time. "It's perfect," Emily breathed, her eyes wide as she took in the vaulted ceilings and the antique furniture. "Exactly what we pictured." Michael nodded, a smile finally easing the tension from his shoulders. "Better even. Look at this old record player." He gestured to a dusty cabinet in the corner, a relic from another era. "Think it works?" They spent the first hour exploring, marveling at the sheer quiet, the way the light fell through the trees outside, painting shifting patterns on the wooden floors. The kitchen had everything they needed, if a little dated. The bedroom, with its patchwork quilt and a window overlooking a dense thicket of pines, felt cozy and inviting. Everything seemed to align with the idyllic escape they'd envisioned. But then, as dusk began to bleed purple into the sky, painting the cabin in long, stretching shadows, Michael stumbled upon something that didn't quite fit the rustic charm. In a small built-in cabinet beneath the television, a surprisingly modern flat screen, a stark contrast to the rest of the decor, he found it. An old VCR. "Huh," he mumbled, pulling it out. It was a clunky black box, its buttons faded, its eject mechanism stiff when he pressed it. "Didn't think people even had these anymore." Emily came over, peering at it. "Oh wow, retro entertainment. You think there are any tapes?" She laughed, a light, carefree sound that felt good to hear after weeks of city stress. Michael chuckled. "Probably just some old nature documentaries or a dusty copy of Top Gun." He reached a hand into the dark recess of the cabinet, feeling around. His fingers brushed against something cold, then something rectangular. He pulled it out. It was a VHS tape, unlabeled. Just a plain black cassette. No handwritten title, no studio sticker, nothing. It felt heavier than a typical tape, somehow denser. "Well, look at that," he said, holding it up. "The mystery tape." Emily's smile faltered just a touch. Her eyes, usually bright, seemed to dim slightly as she looked at the blank cassette. "Think it's just someone's home movies?" "Probably," Michael said, though a tiny prickle of unease had started at the back of his neck. Why would someone leave an unlabeled tape? Most rental cabins cleared out personal items. This felt deliberate. Or forgotten. "Let's find out." He fiddled with the VCR, plugging it into the TV's auxiliary port, a task that felt oddly archaic. The machine whirred to life with a groan, its red power light flickering. Michael slid the unlabeled tape into the slot. The VCR accepted it with a soft click, then a mechanical whirring sound. Emily sat on the worn couch, her knees drawn up to her chest, watching him. The last sliver of natural light was fading outside, leaving the room in a deepening twilight. Michael didn't bother turning on the lights. The dimness felt appropriate. He pressed play. For a long moment nothing happened. Just a blue screen with play displayed in the corner. Then a sudden burst of static, loud and grating, filled the room, making them both jump. It was a harsh white noise like 1,000 tiny needles scraping against a blackboard. "Whoa!" Emily yelped, covering her ears. "Turn that down." Michael fumbled for the remote, lowering the volume. The static subsided to a low hiss. And then through the blizzard of white noise, a flicker. A brief, almost subliminal flash of an image. It was gone before Michael could properly register it. "Did you see that?" Emily whispered, her voice tight. "I think so," Michael replied, leaning closer to the screen. "Just static again." But no. The static began to pulse, like a dying heartbeat. And then slowly, agonizingly slowly, an image began to coalesce. It was dark, grainy, and shaky, as if filmed by someone running through a dense fog. The colors were distorted, greens bleeding into blues, reds into purples. It was a room, a familiar room. Michael's breath hitched. "Emily," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Look." It was this room, the living room of the cabin. The stone fireplace, the antique wooden table, the very couch Emily was sitting on. But it was empty, utterly, chillingly empty. The camera, or whatever was recording, panned slowly, jerkily across the space, like a disembodied eye exploring its surroundings. A knot formed in Michael's stomach. This wasn't a home movie. This wasn't a nature documentary. This was something else. The angle of the footage, slightly low, suggested it was being held by someone. The jerky movements implied they were moving cautiously, perhaps even fearfully. The camera continued its slow, silent sweep of the living room, then drifted towards the hallway leading to the bedroom. Michael felt a cold dread begin to seep into his bones. It was like watching a ghost's perspective, observing a space it once inhabited. And then the sound changed. The hiss of static was still there, but beneath it, a faint, almost imperceptible scratching, like fingernails on wood, or something dragging across the floor. It was erratic, uneven. The camera paused, focusing on the closed bedroom door. The scratching sound intensified, becoming clearer, sharper. It seemed to be coming from inside the bedroom. Emily let out a small, involuntary gasp, clutching Michael's arm. Her fingers were ice cold. "What is that?" she whispered, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and morbid fascination. Michael shook his head, unable to speak. His gaze was fixed on the screen on that closed door, and the sound that seemed to emanate from behind it. The scratching grew louder, more frantic, punctuated by what sounded like faint, muffled thumps. Then the camera moved again, closer to the bedroom door. The scratching was almost deafening now, a frantic, desperate sound. And then a shadow, a long, thin shadow stretching from beneath the door, across the wooden floor. It was too long, too angular to be a normal shadow. It seemed to writhe subtly like something alive. Michael felt his heart pound against his ribs. This was wrong. All wrong. Every instinct screamed at him to turn it off, to throw the tape into the fireplace, to run. But he couldn't move. He was frozen, caught in the terrifying grip of the unknown. The camera stopped at the door. The scratching ceased abruptly. The only sound now was the low hiss of the static and their own ragged breathing. And then a new sound, a faint, almost imperceptible thump from the other side of the door, followed by another, and another. Slow, deliberate, like something being dragged. The camera pulled back slightly, revealing more of the door. And then Michael saw it, just for a split second, before the static erupted into a blinding white flash, obliterating the image. A single red stain, seeping slowly from under the bedroom door. The static consumed the screen, a hurricane of white noise and distorted pixels. But the image of that red stain, spreading like a malevolent flower on the wooden floor, was burned into Michael's mind. And the sound of those slow, deliberate thumps. Emily screamed, a short, sharp sound that tore through the sudden silence when Michael instinctively slammed his thumb down on the eject button. The VCR whirred, spitting out the black, unlabeled tape. It landed on the floor with a dull thud, an inert, innocent-looking object that had just shown them a glimpse into absolute horror. The room was plunged into near darkness, only the faint glow of the TV screen's blue, no signal message illuminating their pale, terrified faces. The silence that followed was no longer heavy. It was suffocating. "Michael," Emily gasped, scrambling away from the couch, her voice trembling. What was that?" He stared at the tape on the floor, then at the closed bedroom door across the room. The door behind which lay their bedroom. The door from which, on the tape, that impossible, chilling red stain had seeped. "I don't know," Michael whispered, his voice hoarse, his eyes darting between the tape and the silent, ominous bedroom door. "But I don't think we're alone here." The cabin, once a symbol of escape and peace, now felt like a trap. The silence, once welcoming, now pulsed with an unseen threat. And the unlabeled vase tape, lying innocently on the floor, felt like a message from the past, a warning, or perhaps an invitation. An invitation to a mystery they had no business uncovering, but one that had now, undeniably, found them. Found them. The young couple, Michael and Sarah, had only been in the remote cabin for a few hours, yet the serenity they'd craved had already evaporated, replaced by a growing knot of unease. Sarah, her brow furrowed, eyed the unlabeled VHS tape Michael held gingerly. It was a relic, an anomaly in a cabin that, despite its rustic charm, boasted modern amenities. This wasn't some quaint, deliberate antique. This was something accidentally, or perhaps deliberately, left behind. A stray piece of a puzzle that didn't belong to their peaceful weekend. "Do you think it's just an old home movie?" Sarah asked, her voice hushed, as if the walls themselves might be listening. The cabin, nestled deep within the whispering pines, felt suddenly vast and empty, its silence no longer comforting but oppressive. Michael turned the tape over in his hands. It was heavy, a solid block of plastic filled with magnetic film, a ghost of technology past. "No title, no date, no company logo," he mused aloud. "Just blank." He ran a thumb over the smooth, worn plastic. "It feels old. Really old." Their initial excitement about the secluded getaway had been quickly overshadowed by the cabin's peculiar atmosphere. A faint, inexplicable chill seemed to permeate the air, even by the roaring fireplace. Shadows in the corners of rooms seemed to deepen and shift, and the occasional creak of the old house settling felt less like wood contracting and more like soft footsteps on the floor above. The discovery of the tape, however, transcended mere ambience. It was a tangible, unsettling object, a direct link to a past they weren't invited to. "We should probably just leave it," Sarah suggested, her gaze darting towards the dusty corner of the antique armoire where Michael had found it, tucked behind a stack of faded board games. "It's probably nothing, or someone's forgotten personal stuff." Michael, however, felt a pull he couldn't quite articulate. A storyteller by nature, his mind was already spinning scenarios, each one more intriguing and unsettling than the last. The tape wasn't just a forgotten item. It felt like a deliberate breadcrumb. "But what if it's not nothing?" he countered, his eyes gleaming with a mixture of apprehension and curiosity. "What if it's a part of this place? A story?" He gestured vaguely around the living room, at the heavy wooden beams, the stone fireplace, the slightly crooked painting of a forgotten landscape. "This cabin has secrets, Sarah. You can feel it." Sarah shivered, despite the warmth of the fire. "And you want to uncover them?" she asked, a hint of trepidation in her voice. "Some secrets are better left buried, Michael." He knew she was right logically, but a primal curiosity, an almost irresistible urge, gnawed at him. The very act of finding the tape, of holding it, felt like an initiation. "Just a peek," he said, trying to sound nonchalant, though his heart was already thrumming a faster rhythm. "If it's just static, or a bad recording of someone's vacation, we'll turn it off. Promise." Sarah sighed, but the resistance in her voice was weakening. The allure of the unknown was a potent force, even for the cautious. She admitted to herself that a part of her, however small and hidden, also wanted to know. The cabin had already made its presence felt. The tape was merely an extension of that enigmatic invitation. "All right," she conceded, a reluctant smile touching her lips. "But if it's anything creepy, anything at all, it's off. No horror movie reenactments, please." The challenge now was finding a VCR. The cabin was old, but the owners had updated most of the electronics. After a brief search, Michael remembered seeing a small, dusty door in the hallway, half hidden behind a coat rack. It led to a cramped, low-ceilinged storage room, smelling faintly of mildew and forgotten things. And there, on a rickety shelf, beneath a pile of old blankets and a broken lamp, sat a relic. A chunky, gray VCR connected to an equally ancient, box-like television set, its screen coated in a fine layer of dust. "Jackpot," Michael whispered, his voice echoing eerily in the confined space. He carefully unplugged the antiquated setup, carrying it back to the living room as if it were a fragile artifact. Setting it up on a small side table, next to the modern flat screen, felt like bridging two different eras. The old TV hummed with a low, almost mournful sound as he plugged it in, its screen glowing with a soft, gray static. Sarah watched, her arms wrapped around herself, a nervous energy buzzing between them. The fire crackled, casting dancing shadows that made the familiar living room feel suddenly alien. The air grew heavy, thick with anticipation. This wasn't just watching a movie. It felt like performing a ritual. Michael took a deep breath, the unlabeled tape now clutched firmly in his hand. He slid it into the VCR with a soft click that seemed to reverberate through the quiet cabin. He pressed play. The VCR whirred, a mechanical sigh of awakening. The static on the old television screen intensified for a moment, then pulsed, dissolving into a kaleidoscope of distorted colors. Then, slowly, agonizingly, an image began to form. It was dark, incredibly dark, as if filmed in near total obscurity. The picture was shaky, handheld, the camera struggling to focus. For a long, unsettling moment, all they could make out was a murky, indistinct blur. Michael leaned closer, his eyes straining, Sarah gripping his arm. Then faint details began to emerge from the gloom. The interior of a room dimly lit, perhaps by a single weak bulb or moonlight filtering through a window. It looked like an old-fashioned nursery. There was a wooden rocking horse, its paint chipped and faded, slowly swaying back and forth, as if pushed by an unseen hand. A mobile adorned with what looked like felt stars and moons, hung limp above an empty crib, its shadow stretching long and distorted on the wall. The camera panned slowly, erratically, capturing the quiet desolation of the scene. A sound, almost imperceptible at first, began to seep through the VCR's crackling speakers. It was a melody, a child's lullaby, but it was warped off-key, like a music box played underwater. It was mournful, chilling, a sound that resonated with deep sorrow and something far more sinister. It seemed to come from nowhere, yet filled the room, making the hairs on Sarah's arms stand on end. The camera paused, focusing on the empty crib. The lullaby swelled, then abruptly cut out, replaced by a soft, almost imperceptible whisper. It was too indistinct to make out words, just a breathy, sibilant sound, like dry leaves rustling in a forgotten corner. Then it happened. A flash. Quick, jarring, and gone almost before their minds could register it. Across the screen, in the murky reflection of what looked like a dusty mirror on the far wall of the nursery, a distorted image flickered. It wasn't a clear face, not a full figure. It was a fleeting impression, a pair of eyes wide and hollow, framed by something dark and indistinct, receding into the shadows as quickly as it appeared. A momentary, horrific glimpse of something that shouldn't have been there, watching from the periphery. The image on the screen immediately dissolved into a blizzard of static, the VCR emitting a protesting groan before falling silent. The old television screen went black, leaving behind only their own terrified reflections. Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. The fire still crackled, but its warmth felt distant, irrelevant. The lullaby, the whisper, the eyes in the reflection, they lingered in the air, echoing in the cavernous space of their minds. What was that? Sarah finally managed, her voice barely a whisper, her grip on Michael's arm like a vice. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and profound dread. Michael, equally stunned, stared at the now dark screen. His heart hammered against his ribs. It was too quick, too blurry, too dark to be certain. But the impression, the feeling of what they had just witnessed was undeniable. It wasn't a home video. It was a deliberate, disturbing message. He fumbled for the remote, his fingers trembling, and hit rewind. The VCR whirred again, then clicked, refusing to cooperate. He tried fast forward, then play again. Nothing. The machine was unresponsive, stuck, as if the tape had been designed for a single terrifying viewing. Or perhaps the VCR itself had simply given up, its ancient mechanisms unable to bear the weight of the horror it had just replayed. It's stuck, Michael murmured, pulling the tape out. The plastic felt colder now, heavier. I can't get it to play again. A profound chill snaked down Sarah's spine, far colder than the cabin's ambient temperature. The eyes, she whispered, her gaze fixed on the now inert tape. Did you see them? In the reflection? Michael nodded slowly, his throat tight. He hadn't just seen them. He had felt them. They were not the eyes of a child, nor of a loving parent. They were the eyes of something ancient, something sorrowful, and something profoundly malevolent. The cabin, which had felt merely enigmatic moments before, now felt actively hostile. The shadows seemed to lengthen, to deepen, to take on new menacing shapes. The creaks and groans of the old house were no longer just settling wood. They were whispers, footsteps, unseen movements in the periphery of their senses. They weren't just guests in this cabin. They were intruders, having stumbled upon a secret that had been carefully hidden away, waiting to be found by someone foolish enough to look. That wasn't just some random recording. Sarah said, her voice trembling. That felt like it was for us. As if on cue, a faint but distinct scratching sound emanated from the wall behind the old television set. A sound that was too deliberate, too rhythmic, to be merely the house settling. It was coming from inside the wall. Michael's gaze snapped to the space where the old television had just been. The space that now felt like a portal to the disturbing imagery they had just witnessed. And then he saw it. Etched into the faded wallpaper, almost invisible unless you knew to look, was a faint, crudely drawn symbol. A symbol that had been briefly, hauntingly, visible on the rocking horse in the horrifying nursery footage they had just witnessed. The air in the small bedroom grew thick, colder than the rest of the cabin, pressing down on them. David, usually the picture of calm, felt a shiver trace its way up his spine, unrelated to the temperature. He reached out, his fingers tracing the faint lines on the wallpaper. It was unmistakably the same symbol. 3 intersecting lines forming a distorted, almost predatorium, or a jagged, incomplete star. Crude, childlike, yet holding a chilling weight. Jessica gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "No way," she whispered, her voice barely audible. It's really here." Michael, who had been trying to maintain a semblance of composure, felt his rational mind falter. He dismissed the rocking horse as a prop, a coincidence, a trick of the light. But this? Etched directly into the very fabric of the cabin they were renting? That was no coincidence. That was a direct, horrifying link. Emily, usually the quietest, stepped closer, her eyes wide, fixed on the symbol as if mesmerized by its malevolent simplicity. "It's exactly the same," she murmured, her voice laced with a fear that resonated deeply within the others. "This can't be random," David stated, pulling his hand away from the wall as if burned. "This cabin, it's connected to that tape, to whatever happened in that nursery." The implication hung heavy in the silence. They hadn't just found a disturbing piece of footage, they had stumbled into a history, a secret embedded in the very walls around them. Jessica started to back away, her eyes darting around the room, as if expecting something to materialize from the shadows. "We need to leave. Now. This isn't right, guys. We shouldn't be here." Her voice was trembling on the verge of hysteria. "Hold on, Jess," Michael said, trying to sound firm, though his own heart was hammering against his ribs. "Running now won't erase what we've seen. We need to understand. Why is that symbol here? What does it mean?" He looked at David, searching for answers. David, however, was already moving, his analytical mind kicking into overdrive, overriding the primal fear. "If it's here, it might be elsewhere. This symbol, the tape, it's a story, and we've only seen the beginning." He began to methodically inspect the faded wallpaper, running his hands along the seams, checking for any loose panels or hidden compartments. Emily, despite her fear, felt a strange pull, a morbid curiosity. She started examining the baseboards, the dusty corners, the old, built-in wardrobe in the room. Jessica, unwilling to be left alone, reluctantly stayed, hovering near Michael, her gaze constantly flitting towards the door. The search began, slow and meticulous, each creak of the old floorboards, each whisper of the wind outside, amplifying the tension. They moved through the small bedroom, then into the adjacent bathroom, and finally back into the main living area, their eyes now trained to spot anything out of place. The cabin, which had felt cozy and rustic just hours ago, now felt oppressive, like a tomb holding forgotten secrets. Every shadow seemed deeper, every sound more sinister. It was Emily who made the next discovery, not a symbol this time, but something equally unsettling. In the back of a dusty, unused cupboard in the kitchen, behind a stack of old yellowed newspapers, she found it. A small wooden toy horse, much smaller than the rocking horse on the tape, but undeniably similar in its worn, antique appearance. Its paint was chipped, one of its tiny legs was broken, and its once vibrant mane and tail were now mere wisps of frayed string. What made her gasp was the faint, almost invisible etching on its flank, the same crudely drawn symbol. She held it up, her hand shaking. "Guys, look." Michael took the toy from her, his brow furrowed. "Another one. This isn't just some random doodle. This symbol, it's everywhere." He turned the toy over in his hands. It felt ancient, imbued with a silent, heavy sorrow. "This confirms it," David said, his voice grim. "This cabin was lived in by someone connected to that tape. Someone who knew this symbol, perhaps even drew it." He paused, a new thought dawning on him. And if this toy was hidden, what else is? They intensified their search, their earlier trepidation now replaced by a desperate need to uncover the truth. They pulled out old drawers, checked under loose rugs, even tapped along the walls, listening for hollow spots. The cabin was old, full of nooks and crannies. It was David, exploring the small, cramped space under the stairs that doubled as a utility closet, who found the most significant clue yet. Pushing aside a stack of old, brittle firewood, his hand brushed against something metallic. He pulled it out, revealing a small, rusted tin box, no bigger than a shoebox, covered in a thick layer of dust and cobwebs. It felt surprisingly heavy. "I found something," he called out, his voice echoing slightly in the unsettling quiet. The others rushed over as he carefully pried open the rusted lid. Inside, nestled among more dust and a few dried leaves, was a collection of relics from a forgotten past. The first thing he pulled out was a small, leather-bound journal, its cover faded and scuffed, its pages yellowed and brittle. Next to it lay a crumpled, sepia-toned photograph. It depicted a family, a man, a woman, and a small child, no older than 5 or 6, standing in front of what was unmistakably this very cabin. Their faces were blurred, almost ghostly, by the passage of time and the poor quality of the photo, but the haunting familiarity was undeniable. The little girl in the photo, with her dark, wide eyes, seemed to stare directly at them. Then David carefully lifted out a child's drawing book. Its pages were filled with crayon drawings, crude and childlike, yet deeply disturbing. Many of the drawings featured stick figures with exaggerated, terrified expressions, surrounded by dark, shadowy shapes. And repeatedly, on almost every page, was that symbol. Sometimes it was drawn large and prominent, sometimes small and hidden in a corner, almost like a desperate plea. "It's too much," Jessica whispered, her face pale. She pointed a trembling finger at the photograph. "That's them, isn't it? The family from the tape. The little girl. It has to be her." Michael took the journal, his hand surprisingly steady. "Let's see what this says." He carefully opened the brittle cover. The handwriting inside was small, cramped, and faded, sometimes almost illegible, but it was there. The first entry was dated over 40 years ago. August 12, 1978. "Moved into the cabin today. It's quiet here. Too quiet, maybe. Sarah loves the woods, but she keeps talking about a friend she met. Says he lives among the trees." Michael read aloud, his voice low, the words like a chilling echo in the silent cabin. The entries continued, detailing the family's life, but slowly, subtly, a disturbing narrative began to unfold. September 3, 1978. "Sarah's nightmares are getting worse. She says the man in the woods visits her, tells her stories. He tells her where to find things. She drew a strange mark on her rocking horse today. Says it's a secret sign." September 15, 1978. "Heard noises in the woods last night. Like whispering, but no one was there. John thinks I'm imagining things. Sarah drew the symbol on the wall of her room. Says it keeps the bad things away." October 1, 1978. "The whispers are inside the cabin now. They call her name. Sarah talks to them. She says they want to play. John is getting angry, says she's making it up. But I saw it. A shadow moving in the periphery, just beyond the window." October 10, 1978. "The symbol isn't enough. It's not strong enough. They want her. I hear them scratching at the walls. John doesn't believe me. He thinks I'm going mad. But I know what I saw in her eyes tonight. It wasn't Sarah. It was something else." October 17, 1978. "They came for her. I tried to stop them. John. He just stood there. Like he was frozen. He looked right through me. The whispers. They promised her games. Forever games. I saw the symbol on the rocking horse and on the wall. But it didn't protect her. It didn't protect her. They took her into the woods. I heard her crying, then nothing. Just the whispers, laughing." The last entry was barely legible, a frantic scrawl. October 18, 1978. "I can hear them calling to me now. They want me to join their game. I have to find her. I have to find Sarah. The woods are calling. The symbol. I need to draw it everywhere. Maybe it will bring her back. Or maybe it will just keep me safe until they come for me too." The journal abruptly ended. The silence in the cabin was deafening, broken only by Jessica's ragged breathing and the faint, almost imperceptible creaking of the old house. The story, fragmented and terrifying, painted a picture of a family consumed by an unseen horror, a child taken, and a mother driven to madness, leaving behind only desperate scribbles and a chilling symbol. David picked up the drawing book again, flipping through the pages. The crude drawings now took on a new horrifying context. The shadowy figures were no longer just childish imaginings. They were the man in the woods, the whispers, the entities that had claimed Sarah. And the symbol, drawn with such fervent repetition, was a desperate, failing ward. As Michael closed the journal, a sudden sharp rap echoed from outside, directly on the window of the living room. They all froze, eyes wide with terror, staring at the darkened glass. It was too loud, too deliberate to be a tree branch. And then a faint whisper, barely audible, seemed to drift through the walls, calling a name that was not their own, but seemed to resonate with a chilling familiarity. Sarah. The single whispered syllable hung in the air, a cold, invisible tendril wrapping itself around their hearts. Sarah. Jessica's breath hitched, a tiny strangled sound lost in the sudden, profound silence that followed. Her eyes, wide and luminous with terror, locked onto Michael's. He felt a primal chill snake down his spine, a sensation far deeper and more unsettling than the cold mountain air outside. He opened his mouth, but no sound came, his throat suddenly dry and constricted. Neither of them were named Sarah. They had no friends or family named Sarah who would be anywhere near this isolated cabin. Did you hear that? Jessica finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper, trembling. Michael nodded slowly, his gaze darting around the dimly lit living room, as if expecting to see the source of the voice materialize in the shadows. Yeah, I heard it. He tried to infuse his voice with a calm he didn't feel, a desperate attempt to reassure Jessica, and perhaps himself. It was probably just the wind, or the old house creaking. Sound travels weirdly in these old places. But even as the words left his lips, they tasted hollow. The whisper hadn't been the wind. It hadn't been a creak. It had been distinct, human, and impossibly close. And the name, Sarah, it resonated with an eerie clarity, as if spoken directly into their ears, yet it seemed to emanate from the very walls themselves. Jessica wasn't buying it. Her head shook slowly, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. That wasn't the wind, Michael. That was someone. Right outside. Or inside. Her voice cracked on the last word, and she instinctively moved closer to him, seeking what little comfort his presence could offer against the encroaching dread. A shiver, unrelated to the cabin's temperature, ran through Michael. He pulled her into a tight embrace, his arm wrapping around her, but his own eyes continued to scan the room, searching for an explanation, a rational loophole that would allow them to dismiss this escalating nightmare. The cabin, which had felt cozy and rustic just hours ago, now felt like a cage, its wooden walls pressing in, its shadows deepening into ominous pools. Then a new sensation, a sudden sharp drop in the ambient temperature, as if a freezer door had been flung open right there in the living room. It wasn't the gradual chill of a poorly insulated cabin. It was an acute, localized cold that seemed to suck the warmth directly from their skin, raising goosebumps on their arms. Simultaneously, a faint, almost imperceptible scent wafted into the air. Not the pleasant aroma of pine or old wood, but something cloying and ancient, a mix of damp earth, forgotten dust, and a metallic tang that made the hairs on the back of Michael's neck stand on end. It was the smell of something long buried, something unearthed. Do you feel that? Jessica whispered, her teeth chattering slightly. It's freezing. Yeah, Michael mumbled, pulling her closer still. His gaze fell upon the vase player, sitting innocently on the coffee table, the tape still nestled within its slot. The grainy images, the unsettling silence of the abandoned home, the fleeting glimpse of the girl. It all coalesced into a terrifying mosaic. Was this connected? Was Sarah the girl from the tape? Or someone else entirely? A soft scratching began then, a rhythmic, almost deliberate sound, emanating from the ceiling directly above them. Scritch, scritch, scritch. It wasn't the random scurrying of a mouse or squirrel. It had a methodical, almost insistent quality, like tiny sharp nails dragging across old plaster. Michael tilted his head back, straining his ears, his heart thudding against his ribs. The sound seemed to drift, moving slowly from one corner of the room to another, as if something unseen was pacing above them, just out of reach. What is that? Jessica whimpered. burying her face into Michael's shoulder. "I don't know," he confessed, his voice tight. He had to do something. He couldn't just stand there paralyzed by fear. He gently disengaged from Jessica, his eyes still fixed on the ceiling, scanning for any sign of movement, any tremor in the aged wood. "Stay here. I'm going to check the attic access." Before Jessica could protest, Michael moved towards the small, almost hidden hatch in the hallway ceiling. He grabbed a sturdy chair from the dining table, dragged it over and climbed onto it, his hand reaching for the pull cord. The cold seemed to intensify as he neared the hatch, and the faint metallic scent grew stronger. His fingers fumbled with the cord, his nerves frayed, until with a soft click, the latch released. The wooden panel creaked open, revealing a gaping black void above. No light switch was immediately apparent inside the attic. Michael pulled out his phone, activating its flashlight, and shone the beam upwards. Dust motes danced in the light, swirling in the stagnant air. The attic was a cavernous space, filled with vague, shapeless shadows, the skeletal outlines of old furniture, stacked boxes and forgotten relics. The scratching sound had stopped the moment he opened the hatch, replaced by an oppressive silence that felt heavier than the mountain air. He swept the flashlight beam across the dark expanse, searching every nook and cranny. Nothing. No movement, no animal, no visible source for the sound that had just terrorized them. Just an empty, dusty attic, filled with the ghosts of forgotten possessions. Yet the cold, the smell, and the lingering sense of a presence were undeniable. As he lowered himself from the chair, a thin, almost translucent cobweb brushed against his face, sending another jolt of unease through him. He wiped it away with a shudder. "Nothing," he reported to Jessica, who was still huddled on the couch, her arms wrapped around herself. "Just an empty attic. But the sound, and the cold," she whispered, her voice still shaky. Michael knew his explanation sounded weak, even to his own ears. He felt a growing sense of helplessness. This wasn't just an old cabin with creaks and groans. This was something else. Something active. Something that knew their names, or at least, a name that now felt intrinsically linked to their presence here. He returned to the living room, his mind racing. They couldn't just sit there, waiting for the next manifestation. They needed answers. Or at least, a better understanding of what they were dealing with. His eyes once again fell on the VHS player. "The tape," he said, his voice firming with a new resolve. "We need to watch it again. Carefully. Every single frame. There has to be something we missed. Something that explains this." Jessica nodded, her fear momentarily overshadowed by a desperate need for understanding. As Michael pressed play, the familiar grainy images flickered to life on the screen. The silent, unsettling tour of the seemingly abandoned house began anew. This time their attention was hyper-focused, scrutinizing every detail, every shadow, every subtle shift. The unsettling quiet of the tape now felt prescient, a precursor to the oppressive silence that now filled their own cabin. They watched as the camera panned across the dusty living room. The overturned child's toy, the half-eaten meal. Michael paused it on the shot of the child's bedroom, the crib still made, the colorful mobile hanging motionless above it. He zoomed in slightly, his finger hovering over the remote. "Look," he murmured, "the mobile. It's perfectly still. But look closer at the wall behind it." Jessica leaned in, squinting. Just barely visible, almost obscured by a shadow, was a faint childlike drawing taped to the wall. It was too blurry to make out details, but it was unmistakably a drawing. And then as the camera slowly moved past it, they both saw it. A single faded letter S scrawled beneath the drawing, barely legible. A cold dread settled over them. They rewound, played it again, paused, zoomed. Yes, there it was. A child's drawing, and beneath it, a solitary hand-drawn S. "Sarah," Jessica breathed, the name now a terrified whisper. "That is, it's for Sarah, isn't it?" This was her room. Michael felt a sickening lurch in his stomach. The tape wasn't just a random recording of an abandoned house. It was a window into a specific tragedy, a specific story. And that story was now bleeding into their reality. They continued to watch, their anxiety mounting with each passing scene. The camera moved through the house, past the kitchen, into a small study. Michael paused it again. On a dusty bookshelf amidst a collection of old, leather-bound books, something glinted faintly. He zoomed in. It was a small, intricately carved wooden bird, perched on the edge of a book. It looked like a robin, Its painted red breast faded with time. It seemed utterly out of place amidst the academic-looking tomes. "The bird," Jessica pointed out, her voice still hushed. "It looks like something a child would have." Michael felt a sudden, inexplicable urge to find that bird. It was a tangible link, a physical object that might still exist in this cabin right here, right now. He paused the tape, the image of the bird frozen on the screen. "I need to check the study," he announced, rising from the couch, a new desperate determination hardening his resolve. "If that bird is still here, if we can find it, maybe it means something." He grabbed a small LED lantern from their emergency kit, the beam cutting a stark path through the deepening gloom of the cabin. Jessica, despite her fear, followed closely behind him, clutching his arm. They walked down the short hallway, past the kitchen, to the door of the small study they had barely glanced at earlier. Michael pushed the door open. The room was dark, filled with the heavy scent of old paper and dust. He swept the lantern's beam across the bookshelves, his eyes darting from shelf to shelf, comparing the layout to the blurry image on the tape. The books were indeed old, their spines cracked and faded. And then his breath caught in his throat. There it was. On the third shelf from the top, nestled between a thick volume titled Local Flora and Fauna and a worn copy of Moby Dick, sat the small wooden bird. Its painted red breast was indeed faded. Its tiny carved eyes seemed to stare out into the darkness. It was exactly as it appeared on the tape. Michael reached out, his hand trembling slightly, and carefully picked up the bird. It was feather-light, smooth beneath his fingertips, yet it felt heavy with an unspoken history. He turned it over in his palm, examining its delicate craftsmanship, and then on its flat, unpainted underside, he saw something else. Faintly etched into the wood, almost invisible against the grain, were three tiny, almost imperceptible letters. S-A-R. He held it up for Jessica to see, his face pale in the lantern light. "Sarah," he whispered, the name now a chilling confirmation, a terrifying anchor to the unfolding horror. This wasn't just a random cabin. This was Sarah's cabin. And whatever happened to her, whatever tragedy unfolded here, was still very much alive. The tape wasn't just a record. It was an invitation. And they had accepted. The words hung heavy in the air, a chilling pronouncement that stripped away any remaining pretense of a relaxing getaway. They had accepted. The realization hit Michael first, a cold, hard knot forming in his stomach. Jessica's face, already pale from the flickering light of the television, drained of all color. Her eyes, wide and unfocused, darted around the familiar living room, now transformed into a stage for a forgotten nightmare. This wasn't just a rented cabin anymore. It was a crime scene, a mausoleum of a life cut short, and they were standing right in the middle of it. "Michael," Jessica whispered, her voice barely a breath, "we have to leave. Now. We have to get out of here." She pushed herself off the worn couch, her movements jerky, as if a sudden jolt of electricity had passed through her. Michael, however, felt rooted to the spot. A profound sense of dread mingled with an almost irresistible pull. "Leave? And go where, Jess? Back into the dark? What if we're already part of it?" He gestured vaguely at the television, then at the room around them. His mind was racing, trying to process the impossible implications. Sarah, the girl on the tape, the victim, and this cabin, her cabin, was their temporary home. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow cast by the antique lamp, suddenly held a sinister weight. Jessica stopped, her initial panic giving way to a different kind of fear, one that crept in slowly, insidiously. "What do you mean, part of it?" Her eyes narrowed, searching his face for an answer neither of them possessed. "I don't know," Michael admitted, running a hand through his hair. "But we found the tape. We watched it. We know her name. We know this is her cabin. Feels like we've been drawn in, like we're supposed to find something or something is supposed to find us." He shivered, despite the warmth of the cabin. A sudden gust of wind rattled the window panes, a mournful sigh from the ancient trees outside. The storm they had ignored earlier seemed to be growing in intensity, a fitting soundtrack to their escalating terror. "This is insane, Michael. This is a horror movie," Jessica insisted, though her voice lacked conviction. She started pacing, a tight circle in the small living room. "We call the police. We tell them what we found. They can investigate." "And say what, Jess?" We found a creepy old VHS tape of a girl who might have lived here, and now we think something bad happened to her. They'd laugh us out of the station. Or worse, they'd think we had something to do with it. We're the only ones here." Michael's logic, as twisted as it sounded, held a terrifying ring of truth. They were isolated, miles from any town, and had stumbled upon a mystery that felt centuries old. "So what do we do?" Jessica pleaded, her voice cracking. "Just sit here? Wait for whatever happened to her to happen to us?" Michael's gaze fell back to the television, to the static snow that danced across the screen. "We watch it again," he said, his voice low, resolute. "But this time we watch it differently. We know her name. We know this cabin. Maybe there's something we missed. Something she was trying to tell us." Jessica hesitated, her eyes fixed on the flickering screen. The thought of replaying the footage, of inviting that dread back into the room, was almost unbearable. But the alternative, to leave, to run without understanding, felt equally impossible now. A strange, morbid curiosity, a primal human need to understand the unknown, began to override her fear. "Okay," she finally agreed, her voice barely a whisper. "But if we see anything at all that makes us think we're in danger, we leave. We don't care about the storm, we don't care about anything. We just go." Michael nodded, his jaw tight. He rewound the tape, the soft whirring sound cutting through the sudden silence in the room. He pressed play, and the grainy image of Sarah, vibrant and tragically unaware, reappeared on the screen. This time everything was different. The cabin, once a cozy retreat, now felt like a stage, every object a prop in a macabre play. They watched Sarah, not as a random girl in a random video, but as the previous occupant of their cabin, her life intertwined with the very walls surrounding them. "Look at her eyes," Jessica pointed out, her finger trembling slightly as she gestured at the screen. "In that first scene when she's just talking to the camera, she keeps glancing off to the side, like she's expecting someone or she's not entirely alone." Michael leaned closer, his eyes scrutinizing the subtle movements. "You're right. I thought it was just her being a little shy, or maybe looking at the person filming. But now, it feels different, more like apprehension." They watched as Sarah walked through the kitchen, humming a tune. "That mug," Michael suddenly exclaimed, pointing a finger at a ceramic mug on Sarah's counter in the video. It was a simple hand-painted mug with a faded blue stripe. "Look, it's the same mug we used this morning for coffee. It's in the cupboard right now." Jessica's eyes snapped to the kitchen counter in their own cabin, then back to the screen. A cold wave washed over her. It was true. The same chipped, slightly discolored mug. This wasn't just a similar cabin. It was the exact same cabin down to the small, mundane details. The reality of it was far more unsettling than any ghost story. As Sarah moved into the living room, they noticed the antique grandfather clock in the corner, its pendulum swinging rhythmically. "That clock hasn't worked since we got here," Jessica whispered, her voice laced with dread. "It stopped at 11:37. Michael looked at their own clock. Indeed, it was frozen, its hand stuck. He hadn't thought anything of it, just another charmingly rustic detail. Now it felt like a silent witness, eternally paused at a moment of significance. They continued to watch, their senses heightened, every detail scrutinized. Sarah's playful banter with the unseen person behind the camera now seemed strained, her laughter a little too forced in places. The moments of silence, previously unremarkable, now felt pregnant with unspoken tension. Then came the part where Sarah was in the bedroom, showing off her new painting. "Wait, stop," Jessica said urgently. "Rewind a little." Right there, when she turns her back to the camera to face the painting. Michael paused, then slowly rewound. As Sarah turned, her back briefly obscured the view. But for a fleeting second, just as she moved, a shadow, impossibly deep and unnaturally defined, seemed to flit across the far corner of the room behind her. It was too quick to be certain, too ephemeral to truly grasp, but it was there. "Did you see that?" Jessica breathed, her hand flying to her mouth. "The shadow, it moved." I think so," Michael stammered, his heart hammering against his ribs. He replayed the segment again, frame by frame, painstakingly slow. Yes, there it was. A flicker, a distortion in the already grainy image, something that wasn't quite a person but definitely not just a trick of the light. It was gone as quickly as it appeared, swallowed by the darkness of the room. It's like someone else was in the room with her," Jessica whispered, her voice barely audible. Someone she didn't know was there. Or someone she did know, but didn't want the camera to see. The atmosphere in the cabin grew heavier, the air thick with unspoken fear. The wind outside howled louder, rattling the windows with increasing ferocity, as if trying to break in or perhaps to warn them. Michael felt a cold dread seep into his bones. This wasn't just a girl on a tape anymore. This was a tragedy unfolding, and they were witnesses centuries too late, yet horrifyingly present. He thought back to the strange feeling he'd had earlier, the sense of being watched, the subtle shifts in the cabin's ambience. Had it been his imagination, or had the cabin itself been trying to tell them something all along? They watched the tape's final terrifying moments again. Sarah's growing fear, her hushed whispers, the sudden drop of the camera, the muffled scream. This time, knowing what they knew, the sound wasn't just a generic scream of terror. It was Sarah's scream, echoing in her cabin. And the silence that followed, the empty, desolate static, was not just the end of a tape. It was the end of a life. Michael hit stop, plunging the screen back into static, but the images, the sounds were burned into their minds. It wasn't just a shadow, Jess, he said, his voice hoarse. Someone was there. Someone was with her. And they didn't want to be seen. Jessica nodded, her face a mask of terror. And she was trying to tell us. She dropped the camera. Maybe to show us something or to leave a record. She looked around the living room, her gaze sweeping over every object, every piece of furniture, searching for something, anything that might offer another clue. Her eyes landed on the small, unassuming fireplace, its stone hearth cold and unused. A faint scratching sound, almost imperceptible over the wind, seemed to emanate from within it. "Did you hear that?" Jessica asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Michael strained his ears. The wind outside was a tempest now, howling like a banshee, but beneath it, he could just discern a faint rhythmic scratching. Asterisk scratch. 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 Asterisk. It was coming from the fireplace. His blood ran cold. He slowly rose, his legs feeling like lead, and moved towards the stone hearth. Jessica, despite her fear, followed close behind, her hand gripping his arm. The scratching grew slightly louder, more distinct as they approached. It wasn't the sound of an animal. It was too deliberate, too rhythmic. It sounded like something inside the chimney. Michael knelt, peering into the dark, soot-stained opening of the fireplace. The scratching stopped abruptly. A profound silence fell, broken only by the furious storm outside. He reached a tentative hand into the cold, empty space, his fingers brushing against rough stone and a thin layer of ash. Nothing. It stopped, Jessica breathed, her eyes wide. Just as they were about to retreat, a small dark object suddenly clattered down the chimney flue, landing with a soft thud on the hearth beside Michael's hand. It was a small, tarnished silver locket, intricately engraved with faded initials. Michael picked it up, his fingers trembling. The locket was warm, almost unnervingly so. He flipped it open. Inside, on one side, was a tiny faded photograph of a young woman with a bright, hopeful smile. On the other, etched into the silver, was a single word: run. A single stark word, etched into the silver: run. Michael's breath hitched, a cold, sharp gasp that seemed to echo in the silent, oppressive air of the cabin. The locket, still warm in his palm, felt less like an antique and more like a live coal, branding that terrifying command onto his very soul. Run. From what? From whom? His eyes darted around the room, every shadow suddenly deepening, every creak of the old wood transforming into something sinister. The cabin, which moments ago had felt like a cozy, if unsettling escape, now pulsed with a cold, malevolent energy. He stared at the faded photograph of the young woman. Her smile, once hopeful, now seemed to twist into a silent scream, a desperate plea trapped behind the silver frame. Was this a warning from her? Was she the one who had etched it there? And if so, what had she been running from? And why was he, Michael, finding this message now years later, tucked away in a secret compartment in a rented cabin? A wave of nausea washed over him, churning with a primal fear he hadn't felt since childhood nightmares. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't some quirky relic. The hidden compartment, the deliberate concealment, the unnerving warmth of the locket itself. It all screamed intentionality, urgency, and a very real, very present danger. The word wasn't a suggestion. It was an imperative. He tried to rationalize it, to push back against the creeping dread. Maybe it was a prop from some amateur film left behind. But the realism, the raw emotion in the woman's eyes, the simple, chilling power of that one word, tore through any attempt at logical dismissal. This was real. Whatever story was unfolding here, whatever happened in this cabin, it was bleeding into his reality. He fumbled for his phone, his thumb hovering over Jessica's contact. He wanted to call her, to hear her voice, to ground himself in something normal, something safe. But what would he say? "Hey honey, I found a locket in a secret wall, and it says run?" She'd think he was losing his mind, or playing a morbid joke. And if this was truly serious, if there was real danger, he didn't want to drag her into it. Not yet. He had to understand. He had to know why he should run before he could warn anyone else. He closed the locket, the click echoing too loudly in the sudden stillness. He tucked it into his pocket, the warmth seeping through his jeans, a constant, unsettling reminder. His gaze fell back on the VCR, the stack of tapes beside it. The tapes. They were the beginning of all this. The locket had to be connected. The woman in the picture, had he seen her on the tapes? He replayed the vague, flickering images in his mind, the faces obscured by static, the distorted voices. It was impossible to tell. A new resolve born of fear and a desperate need for answers hardened within him. He wouldn't run. Not yet. Not until he understood what he was running from. He needed more. More information. More clues. The tapes. They were the key. He picked up the next tape in the stack, his hands shaking slightly. It was unlabeled like all the others. He slid it into the VCR, the mechanical hum a harsh counterpoint to the pounding in his chest. He pressed play, his eyes fixed on the screen, every nerve ending screaming in anticipation. The screen flickered, then resolved into a static-laced image. This time there was no distorted kitchen, no vague figures. This time the image was clearer, sharper, and infinitely more terrifying. It was a room. Not just any room, but this room. The living room of the cabin. His heart leaped into his throat. He recognized the stone fireplace, the rustic wooden beams, even the worn pattern on the rug. But it wasn't empty. In the center of the room, facing away from the camera, was a woman. She was sitting on the floor, her back to the lens, her posture slumped, defeated. Her hair, long and dark, fell over her shoulders, obscuring her face. Michael leaned closer to the screen, a cold dread seeping into his bones. He felt like an intruder watching a private moment, a secret agony. The camera was steady, unmoving, positioned high in a corner, just above where the bookshelf stood now. It was a surveillance angle. Someone had been watching her, or more chillingly, recording her. A small sound emerged from the VCR speakers, a choked sob. The woman on the screen shuddered, her shoulders trembling. She was crying, deep guttural sobs that tore at something inside Michael. He could hear her ragged breathing, the desperate attempts to stifle her distress. It was utterly heartbreaking, and utterly terrifying in its intimacy. Then she slowly, agonizingly slowly turned her head, and Michael gasped. It was her, the woman from the locket. The faded photograph now sprang to life with sickening clarity. Her bright, hopeful smile was gone, replaced by a mask of raw anguish. Her eyes, red-rimmed and swollen, stared directly into the camera, into Michael's eyes, and held a profound, bottomless despair. Her lips moved silently at first, as if she were trying to speak but couldn't find her voice. Then a whisper barely audible over the static, a voice raw and broken. "He knows." Michael froze. He knows? Who knows what? The cabin felt like it was closing in on him, the walls pressing inwards. He looked around wildly, as if the unknown he might materialize from the shadows. The woman on the screen continued, her voice gaining a fragile strength, a desperate urgency. "He knows I tried to leave. He knows about the other place. I can't go back there." Her eyes darted around the room, just as Michael's had, filled with a palpable terror. She was trapped, in this very room. "He watches," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Always. He watches everything." Her gaze returned to the camera, a desperate plea. "If anyone finds this, if anyone hears this, please, tell them. Tell them what he did. Tell them about the others." The others. That word hung in the air, heavy and dark. This wasn't just about her. This was bigger, more sinister. Suddenly her eyes widened, fixed on something just out of frame, to the left of the camera's view. A look of pure, unadulterated terror contorted her face. Her breath hitched a choked gasp. She tried to scramble backward, clawing at the floor, but she was too slow. A shadow fell across the screen, a large, indistinct form moving into the frame from the left. Michael's heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat of pure adrenaline. He leaned even closer, straining to see, to understand. The shadow enveloped the woman. He heard a muffled cry, a desperate, pained sound, then a sudden sickening thud. The camera didn't move. It just kept recording the empty space where she had been, now only a faint, lingering impression on the rug. The sobs had stopped. The desperate pleas had ceased. Only the low, constant hum of the VCR and the relentless crackle of static remained. The air in the cabin grew impossibly cold. Michael's hands were clammy, slick with sweat. He wanted to turn it off to make it stop, but he was transfixed, unable to tear his eyes away from the screen, from the chilling aftermath of whatever had just happened. Then a sound. A low guttural growl followed by heavy footsteps. They moved out of frame, then back in closer to the camera. The shadow returned, larger this time, more defined. It was a man, tall, broad-shouldered. He moved with a chilling deliberation. He stopped directly in front of the camera, his face still obscured by shadow, his back to Michael. He reached up slowly, deliberately, his hand moving towards the camera lens, as if to turn it off. And then, just before the screen went black, just as his fingers brushed the lens, the man's head tilted slightly. Not his face, not a clear view, but Michael caught a glimpse of something. A glint. A reflection. Something metallic and sharp, catching the ambient light. It was on his ring finger. A distinctive, ornate silver ring with a dark, almost black stone set into it. It was unique, unmistakable. Then absolute darkness. The VCR continued to hum, but the screen was black dead. The tape had ended. Michael sat frozen, his mind reeling, struggling to process the horror he had just witnessed. The woman from the locket. Her desperate warning. The terrifying confirmation that she was not just trapped, but actively being watched, hunted. And then the sudden, brutal end, followed by the chilling appearance of the she had spoken of. The ring. The ornate silver ring with the dark stone. It was such a small detail, but it burned itself into Michael's memory. A single concrete piece of evidence from the nightmare he had just endured. He slowly, shakily ejected the tape. His hands were trembling uncontrollably now, his body cold despite the cabin's warmth. The locket in his pocket felt like a burning coal, the word run screaming in his mind. He finally understood. This wasn't some abstract warning from the past. This was a direct, terrifying message, a desperate plea from a woman who had been silenced, a plea that had been waiting for him, for anyone to find it. He stood up, his legs feeling like lead. The cabin no longer felt like a place of mystery to be solved, but a cage, a trap. He had to get out. He had to tell someone. But who would believe him? And what if he was still here? What if he was watching just as he had watched her? His eyes fell on the remaining tapes, a handful of them left in the stack. What else did they contain? More horrors? More clues? He felt a desperate urge to smash them, to destroy them, to erase the nightmare. But another, stronger urge, a chilling curiosity, compelled him. He had to know. He had to see the full story, no matter how terrifying. He owed it to her, the woman in the locket, to understand. He reached for the next tape, his hand shaking, his breath ragged. He knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that whatever came next would only deepen the terror, only make the word run resonate with an even more profound, desperate urgency. He was no longer just an observer. He was part of this story now, whether he wanted to be or not. And he felt a cold, creeping dread that he knew it too. The VCR clicked off, plunging the living room into a silence so profound, so absolute, it felt deafening. The hum of the refrigerator, the distant chirping of crickets, even the gentle whisper of the wind against the cabin walls, all seemed to vanish, swallowed by the gaping maw of Michael's terror. His breath hitched in his throat, a ragged, painful gasp that did nothing to fill his burning lungs. He was frozen, limbs locked, spine rigid, eyes still fixed on the blank, static-flecked television screen where, moments ago, the word run had screamed its desperate warning. Run. The single, stark command echoed in the cavern of his skull, each syllable a hammer blow against the fragile walls of his sanity. It wasn't just a word anymore. It was a premonition, a direct threat, a chilling confirmation that the horror he'd witnessed wasn't confined to the grainy footage of a bygone era. It was alive. It was present. and it was aimed squarely at him. A cold sweat pricked at his skin, clammy and unwelcome. His stomach churned, threatening to revolt. He wanted to move, to scream, to tear himself away from the oppressive weight of the cabin, but his body refused to obey. Every nerve ending screamed, every muscle fiber tensed, anticipating a blow, a touch, a whisper from the shadows that now seemed to writhe and stretch in the periphery of his vision. He squeezed his eyes shut, trying to dislodge the image of the frantic father, the haunted mother, the terrified children, the shadowy figure. But it was no use. The scenes replayed behind his eyelids in vivid, horrifying detail, culminating always in that final desperate plea. Run. When he finally managed to pry his eyes open, the room felt different. The familiar rustic charm of the rented cabin had evaporated, replaced by an unsettling, almost predatory stillness. The shadows cast by the moon through the window seemed deeper, more alive. The very air felt heavy, charged with an unseen presence, a malevolent energy that prickled the hairs on his arms. He slowly, agonizingly turned his head, scanning the room. The armchair where he'd been sitting, the coffee table with the forgotten snacks, the stone fireplace, all seemed to gaze back at him with an unnerving sentience. He was alone, utterly, terrifyingly alone. Yet the feeling of being watched was overwhelming, a suffocating blanket that pressed in from all sides. His gaze landed on the VCR, then the tape itself, still half ejected from the machine. He had to get rid of it, destroy it, erase the evidence of this nightmare. But another, more primal instinct screamed at him to understand, to find answers. Who were they? What happened to them? And most importantly, who was he? The one who knew Michael was watching. The one who had made the word run resonate with such personal urgency. He finally found the strength to move, pushing himself up from the sofa, his legs wobbly like a newborn foal's. He stumbled towards the front door, his only thought to escape, to put as much distance between himself and this cursed place as humanly possible. His hand fumbled with the deadbolt, fingers slick with sweat, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. Locked. Of course it was locked. He'd locked it himself before settling down for his movie night. But now the click of the bolt felt less like a security measure and more like a final, definitive seal on his fate. He yanked at the doorknob, twisting it frantically, as if sheer force could shatter the wood, the frame, the very walls holding him captive. Nothing. The door remained stubbornly shut. He spun around, eyes darting around the cabin, searching for another exit, another way out. The back door, the windows. He bolted to the kitchen, peering out the window over the sink. Nothing but the inky blackness of the forest, the trees, a dense, impenetrable wall. He tried the back door, a sliding glass door leading to a small deck. He tugged, pushed, rattled it. It was locked too, a heavy wooden dowel wedged in the track, an extra layer of security the rental agent had mentioned. Extra security. Now it felt like a prison bar. Panic began to rise, a hot, choking wave that threatened to drown him. He needed to call someone. Anyone. Emily. The police. The rental company. His phone. Where was his phone? He scrambled back to the living room, tearing through his backpack, tossing clothes and snacks aside in his desperate search. He found it, finally, buried under a hoodie. His fingers trembled as he unlocked the screen, the familiar glow a small beacon of hope in the encroaching darkness. He pulled up Emily's contact, his thumb hovering over the call button. No service. The words "no service" glowed mockingly at the top of his screen, stark white against the digital black. A cold, heavy stone settled in his gut. He tried again, dialing 911 this time just in case. The call wouldn't even connect. Just a flat, dead line. He remembered the rental agent's casual warning about spotty reception this deep in the woods. He'd laughed then, dismissing it as a minor inconvenience. Now it felt like a death sentence. He was truly cut off. Isolated. Alone. The cabin was silent again, but it was a different kind of silence now. Not empty, but expectant. As if it were holding its breath, waiting for him. He felt a sudden, inexplicable urge to look back at the VCR. He resisted, his eyes darting instead to the large window overlooking the front yard, the one where he'd seen the shadowy figure in the tape. He stared into the darkness, straining his eyes, trying to pierce the veil of night. Was that a flicker? A movement between the trees? Or was it just his mind playing tricks, painting monsters where there were none? He couldn't tell. The fear was distorting everything. twisting reality into a grotesque parody of itself. He took a shaky breath, trying to calm his racing heart, to think rationally. What if it was just a prank? A sick, twisted joke by the cabin owners? But the terror on the family's faces, the desperate plea of the father, it was too real, too raw. No actor could fake that kind of primal fear. And the run message? How could they have known he would be watching? How could it have been directed at him? Unless it wasn't a prank. Unless it was real. And the person who left the tape, the one who inserted that final personal warning, was still here. Or knew he was here. A soft creak echoed from upstairs. Michael froze. Every muscle in his body locked. He hadn't heard anything like that before. It wasn't the settling of old wood, not the groan of the house. It was too distinct, too deliberate. Like a footstep. His gaze snapped to the staircase, disappearing into the darkness of the second floor. He'd only been upstairs to put his bag in the bedroom. The rest of the floor had been empty, silent. Creak. This time it was louder, undeniably, from the floor directly above him. A floorboard groaning under weight. Someone was up there. His blood ran cold. He wasn't alone. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow, stealing the air from his lungs. The cabin wasn't just a place where something terrible had happened. It was a place where something terrible was happening. To him. He backed away slowly, silently, his eyes fixed on the top of the stairs, his hand reaching behind him, fumbling for something, anything, to use as a weapon. His fingers closed around the heavy, ornate poker from the fireplace set. It was iron solid and offered a small, desperate comfort. He stood there, gripping the poker, his knuckles white, listening. The cabin was silent again, but it was a different silence this time. A watchful, predatory silence. The absence of sound was more terrifying than any scream. Had he imagined it? The creaking, the footsteps. Was the fear making him hallucinate? He wanted to believe it, to dismiss it as a product of his overactive imagination, fueled by the terrifying VHS tape. But deep down, a chilling certainty settled in his bones. He hadn't imagined it. He remembered the father's eyes, wide with unspeakable horror, looking directly into the camera. He remembered the desperate, raspy voice. He remembered the word run. And he remembered the cold, creeping dread that he knew Michael was watching. Knew he was here. He had to rewatch it. He had to. There had to be something he missed, some clue, some detail that would explain this. Explain the footsteps upstairs. Explain the feeling of being hunted. With a profound sense of dread, as if walking to his own execution, Michael moved back towards the visor. His hand, still trembling, reached for the tape. He pushed it back into the machine, the soft clunk echoing unnaturally loud in the oppressive silence. He pressed play. The screen flickered to life, static giving way to the grainy, distorted image of the cabin's living room. His living room. The same one he was standing in right now. The familiar terror began to coil in his stomach once more. But this time, it was intertwined with a new, horrifying layer of personal dread. He watched the static-filled opening, the shaky camera work, the muffled sounds of a family trying to enjoy their vacation. He watched the subtle shifts, the growing unease, the moments he now recognized as precursors to pure terror. He watched the father's increasing paranoia, sensing something unseen, something lurking. And then he saw it. It wasn't a new detail. It had been there all along, buried in the background, obscured by the low quality of the tape, overshadowed by the more overt horrors. But now, with his heightened senses, with the cold certainty that he was not alone in this cabin, it screamed at him. In one of the early shots, as the camera panned across the living room, before the real terror began, before the family was fully aware of their predicament, there was a brief, almost imperceptible moment. A shadow not quite right at the very edge of the frame near the top of the stairs. It was too fleeting to be definitive, too dark to be clear, but now Michael knew what he was looking at. It wasn't just a shadow. It was a figure. A tall, gaunt form, half hidden in the gloom, watching the family. Watching them from the top of the stairs. The same stairs that now led to the room where Michael had heard the creaking. His breath caught in his throat. He stopped the tape, rewound it slightly, and played it again, his eyes glued to that one spot. Yes, it was there. A silent, terrifying observer. The he they were running from. The he who had been watching them, just as he was watching Michael now. The terror on the tape was not a memory. It was a continuous loop, an unbroken chain of fear stretching from that family to him. The warning run wasn't a plea from the past. It was a desperate whisper from the present, from the very walls of this cabin. He looked up from the screen, his gaze slowly, agonizingly drifting towards the staircase. The darkness at the top seemed deeper, heavier. He could almost feel eyes on him, cold and unblinking. The cabin wasn't just a setting for the horror. It was the horror, and he was trapped inside it. He was trapped inside it. Every breath felt like a desperate gasp for air in a suffocating void. The silence pressed in, heavy and absolute, broken only by the frantic drumming of his own heart. He didn't want to move, didn't want to breathe, didn't want to acknowledge the chilling presence that seemed to solidify in the air around him. But the staircase remained, a gaping maw leading into deeper shadow, a silent dare. A part of him, a primal, terrified part, screamed to run, to smash through the windows, to tear down the door, anything to escape this suffocating tomb. But another part, a morbid, desperate curiosity, a need to understand what had become of Jessica, what this cabin truly was, pulled him forward. His feet, heavy as lead, scraped against the wooden floorboards. Each step was a monumental effort, a defiance of the invisible force that seemed to anchor him to the spot. The air grew colder, not just a drop in temperature, but a bone-deep chill that seeped into his very marrow. He reached the first step, his hand instinctively reaching for the banister. The wood felt ancient, rough, almost alive beneath his trembling fingers. He could almost hear whispers, faint and indistinct, rising from the darkness above. Were they his own thoughts, fracturing under the strain, or something else entirely? He began to ascend, one agonizing step after another. The creaks and groans of the old staircase echoed unnaturally loud in the profound silence, each sound a hammer blow against his frayed nerves. He kept his gaze fixed upwards, trying to penetrate the inky blackness, searching for what? A shape? A glint of an eye? A flicker of movement? There was nothing but the oppressive void, vast and hungry. His imagination, supercharged by terror, painted grotesque images in the shadows, twisting faces, elongated limbs, forms that shifted just at the periphery of his vision. He blinked and they were gone, replaced by the same impenetrable darkness. Midway up, a sudden sharp crack split the air. Michael froze, his heart leaping into his throat. He spun around, his eyes darting wildly down to the living room below. Nothing. The worn armchair, the dusty coffee table, the flickering static of the television screen. All perfectly still, perfectly mundane, yet infused with an unspeakable menace. He turned back, his breath catching. Had it been the house settling? Or something else, something playing with him? A cold dread settled over him, heavier than anything he had felt before. This wasn't just a haunting. It was a psychological assault, a deliberate unraveling of his sanity. He forced himself to continue, his muscles screaming in protest. Each step up the stairs felt like a step deeper into a nightmare from which there was no waking. Finally, he reached the landing. The darkness here was absolute, a palpable presence that seemed to press in on all sides, stealing the light, absorbing sound. There were 3 doors leading off the landing. One to the master bedroom, one to a smaller guest room, and one to the bathroom. All were closed, silent, ominous. He stood there, panting, trying to orient himself. The air was thick with a faint, cloying scent he couldn't quite place. Damp earth, old wood, and something metallic like blood. His stomach lurched. He knew with a sickening certainty that he had to check the master bedroom first. That was where he and Jessica had been sleeping. That was where the horror had truly begun to manifest, where Jessica's behavior had shifted so drastically. His hand trembled as he reached for the doorknob of the master bedroom. It was cold, surprisingly cold, as if it had been sitting in an icebox. He hesitated, his mind racing, picturing what could be behind that door. Jessica transformed? The entities from the tape? Nothing at all, just an empty room waiting to swallow him whole? He took a deep, shuddering breath, trying to steady his nerves, to prepare himself for the inevitable. The silence stretched, taut and agonizing. With a sudden surge of adrenaline, he twisted the knob and pushed the door open. The room was empty, completely, utterly empty. The bed stripped bare of its sheets, pillows tossed haphazardly on the floor. The dresser drawers were pulled open, clothes spilling out. The small nightstands were overturned. It looked ransacked, as if someone had torn through it in a fit of rage or desperation. But there was no sign of Jessica. No blood, no struggle, just chaos. A cold wave of despair washed over Michael. Where was she? What had happened here? His eyes scanned the room, searching for any clue, any indication. Then he saw it. On the wall opposite the bed, scrawled in what looked like dried mud or rust, was a symbol. It was crude, ancient-looking, a spiral with jagged lines radiating outwards, reminiscent of the symbols he'd briefly glimpsed on the VHS tape, in the background of those unsettling rituals. His blood ran cold. This wasn't just a random act of vandalism. This was connected. This was part of it. He stumbled backward, bumping into the door frame. The symbol seemed to pulse in the dim light, drawing his gaze, pulling him into its sinister depths. He felt a profound sense of wrongness, of something ancient and malevolent having marked this place. This wasn't a human act, or at least not entirely. Felt like a signature, a claim. He backed out of the master bedroom, his heart hammering against his ribs, and turned his attention to the next door, the guest room. He didn't want to open it, but he knew he had to. He couldn't leave any stone unturned, not if there was even the slightest chance of finding Jessica, or finding an answer. This time he didn't hesitate as long. He grabbed the knob, twisted, and pushed. This room was different. It wasn't ransacked. It was meticulously clean, almost unnervingly so. The bed was perfectly made, the small dresser neatly arranged. But there was something else. On the nightstand, beside a small antique lamp, lay a single carefully folded piece of paper. Michael stepped inside, his eyes fixed on the paper. He approached it cautiously, as if it might bite. His fingers trembled as he picked it up. It was old, brittle, and felt like parchment. He unfolded it, his breath catching in his throat. It was a drawing. A child's drawing, perhaps. Crude figures, stick-like, holding hands in a circle. But their faces were disturbingly blank, featureless. And in the center of the circle, drawn in a darker, thicker line, was the same spiral symbol he had just seen in the master bedroom. Beneath the drawing, scrawled in shaky, almost illegible handwriting, were two words: "They watch." A chill that had nothing to do with the cabin's temperature ran down Michael's spine. They watch. Who were they? The people from the tape? The entity that seemed to inhabit this place? Or was it a warning from someone who had been here before? Someone who had understood the true nature of this cabin? He clutched the paper, his mind reeling. This was a message, a desperate plea from the past. He looked around the guest room again, his gaze now sharpened by this new, terrifying piece of information. The meticulous cleanliness suddenly felt sinister, like a facade. He noticed a small wooden toy chest in the corner. It looked innocent enough, but after everything he had seen, nothing in this cabin could be trusted. He knelt down, his hand hovering over the lid. His instincts screamed at him to leave it alone, to get out, but the desperate need for answers for Jessica drove him forward. He lifted the lid. Inside it wasn't toys. It was filled with more drawings. Dozens of them, all in the same crude, childlike style. And every single one depicted the same thing. Stick figures, blank faces, holding hands in a circle around that ominous spiral symbol. But some of the drawings were more disturbing. Some showed the figures with their heads tilted back, mouths open in silent screams. Others showed them dissolving into wisps of shadow. And in one particularly chilling drawing, a single stick figure was depicted lying on the ground, while another larger, shadowy figure loomed over it, its hand reaching down into the prone figure's chest. The spiral symbol was drawn on the chest of the shadowy figure. Michael gasped, dropping the drawing as if it had burned him. This wasn't just a child's imagination. This was a record, a terrifying visual diary of what had happened here, perhaps over generations. The blank faces, the silent screams, they weren't just drawings. They were echoes. Echoes of the victims, of the rituals, of the entity that had claimed this place and perhaps claimed Jessica. He scrambled back, his mind threatening to snap under the weight of it all. The cabin wasn't just old. It was ancient. It wasn't just haunted. It was a living, breathing entity, a predator that fed on fear and sorrow. The VHS tape wasn't just a recording. It was an invitation, a key that unlocked the cabin's true, horrific nature. And he and Jessica had been naive enough, foolish enough, to accept it. He stumbled out of the guest room, his legs feeling like jelly. The words "they watch" echoed in his mind, merging with the silent screams from the drawings. He knew with a certainty that chilled him to the core, that he was being watched now. Not just by some unseen entity, but by the cabin itself. The walls, the floorboards, the very air seemed to hum with a malevolent awareness. He was an insect caught in a web, and the spider was slowly, deliberately tightening its threads. He reached the last door, the bathroom. He almost didn't want to open it. What fresh horror awaited him there? But he had to. He had to know. He gripped the cold doorknob, his hands slick with sweat, and pushed it open. The bathroom was dark, even darker than the other rooms. A faint metallic smell, stronger here, assaulted his nostrils. He fumbled along the wall, searching for a light switch, his heart pounding. His fingers brushed against something cold and ceramic. He found the switch and flipped it. The single, bare bulb overhead flickered, then bathed the small room in a sickly yellow light. Michael gasped, a strangled sound escaping his lips. The mirror above the sink was completely shattered. Not just broken, but meticulously shattered into 1,000 tiny shards, like a mosaic of broken glass. And on the wall behind where the mirror had been, scrawled in what was unmistakably dried blood, was the spiral symbol. But this time it wasn't just a symbol. It was surrounded by words, written in the same crude, desperate hand as the note in the guest room. Join us. The blood. It wasn't just a symbol anymore. It was a command, a desperate, chilling invitation scrawled in the most primal of mediums. Join us. The words burned into Michael's vision. A grotesque brand on the wall where his reflection should have been. His breath hitched, a cold metallic taste filling his mouth. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't a delusion. This was real, horrifying, and happening now. His phone felt like a block of ice in his trembling hand as he dialed 911 again. His voice, when it came, was a ragged whisper, barely coherent. It's Michael Miller. The cabin. They wrote on the wall. In blood. The mirror's gone. They want me to join them. He knew how insane he sounded. He didn't care. The terror was a physical weight pressing down on him, suffocating him. This time the dispatcher's tone was different. Sharper. More urgent. The mention of blood and a missing mirror had finally cut through the previous skepticism. Sir, can you confirm the address? Are you safe? Is anyone else in the house? I'm alone, Michael gasped, backing away slowly from the wall, his eyes still glued to the crimson message. I don't know if I'm safe. Just please hurry. He retreated to the living room, pressing himself against the far wall, phone still clutched to his ear, listening to the dispatcher's calm, steady instructions to stay put, to lock all doors. As if a lock could stop something that wrote in blood. The siren wail, when it finally pierced the night, was the most beautiful sound Michael had ever heard. 2 police cruisers pulled up, lights flashing, painting the cabin in strobing red and blue. Officer David Chan, the younger of the two from his previous encounters, and a new older officer with a stern face, Officer Sarah Jenkins, emerged, flashlights cutting through the darkness. Michael practically stumbled out the front door, hands raised, trying to project an image of a sane man, despite the frantic pulse hammering in his ears. It's in the master bedroom, he croaked, leading them inside, his eyes darting to every shadow, every creak of the old cabin. Officer Jenkins, her expression grim, led the way, her hand resting near her sidearm. Chun followed, his gaze wary. They stopped dead in the bedroom doorway. The air in the room felt heavy, charged with a malevolent energy. The stark white wall, the gaping absence of the mirror, and the chilling message written in crimson, all under the beam of their flashlights, created a tableau of pure horror. Oh my God! Officer Chun breathed, his voice barely audible. Officer Jenkins said nothing, but her jaw tightened. She stepped forward, carefully avoiding touching anything, her flashlight beam tracing the crude spiral, the jagged letters. This is fresh, she murmured, her voice low. And definitely blood. She turned to Michael, her eyes piercing. Mr. Miller, you've been telling us about strange occurrences here. This changes things. Explain everything. From the beginning. Michael recounted it all, every detail, every unsettling discovery. The VHS tape, the flickering images, the missing girl, Emily, the strange symbols, the notes, the feeling of being watched, the previous dismissed calls. He even showed them the guest room where he'd found the first note, still tucked under the pillow. He spoke with a desperate clarity, the fear lending an unusual focus to his words. Officer Jenkins listened intently, nodding occasionally, her gaze flicking between Michael and the bloody wall. She pulled out her radio. We have a confirmed break-in and vandalism with what appears to be human blood at the Miller residence, 147 Whisperwood Lane. requesting a forensic team and additional units. Advise caution. The cabin, which had felt like a tomb, now buzzed with a different kind of tension. As Jenkins secured the perimeter and Chun took photos, Michael watched them, a strange mix of relief and dread washing over him. They believed him now. But what did that mean? The message "Join us" echoed in his mind. It wasn't just a threat. It was an invitation. An invitation to what? Officer Jenkins, flashlight still in hand, began a more thorough examination of the master bedroom. She ran her hand along the wall beside the bloody message, her brow furrowed. The mirror, she mused. It was quite large, wasn't it? And heavy. Yes, Michael confirmed. Antique, I think. Built into the wall. Jenkins tapped the wall beside the spiral, then moved her hand towards the corner. This paneling, it's not quite right here. Her fingers traced a faint seam, almost invisible beneath layers of paint and age. It was just to the left of where the mirror had been, extending from the floor to the ceiling. She pressed against it. Nothing. She tried again, harder, pushing near what looked like a faint, almost imperceptible latch. With a soft click that resonated in the suddenly silent room, a section of the wall, about 2 feet wide, pivoted inward, revealing a narrow, pitch-black void. Michael gasped, a cold dread seizing him. Officer Chun staggered back, his flashlight beam shaking. Officer Jenkins, however, remained stoic, her beam plunging into the darkness. The air that wafted out was stagnant, heavy, carrying a faint, earthy smell, like old dust and something else. Something metallic and cloying like dried rust. What is that? Michael stammered, his heart hammering against his ribs. Jenkins didn't answer immediately. She took a deep breath, drew her sidearm, and cautiously edged closer to the opening. Stay back, both of you, she ordered, her voice firm. She squeezed through the narrow gap, her flashlight beam cutting through the oppressive darkness within. Michael and Chun exchanged wide-eyed glances. The cabin had another secret. A hidden passage. A terrifying, impossible revelation. A few moments later, Jenkins' voice, muffled but urgent, echoed from within. Chun, get in here. And call for more backup. Forensics is going to have a field day. Officer Chun, still looking pale, handed Michael his own flashlight. Stay by the door, Mr. Miller. Don't touch anything. He squeezed into the hidden passage, his flashlight beam joining Jenkins inside. Michael stood frozen, the beam of his borrowed flashlight trembling in his hand. He could hear their hushed voices, the occasional clink of something being moved, the rustle of fabric. The waiting was excruciating, each second stretching into an eternity. What could be in there? What twisted secret had this cabin been holding all along? The "Join us" message on the wall now took on an even more sinister meaning. Was this where they had joined? Finally, Officer Chun emerged, his face ashen, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock and disgust. He didn't speak, just shook his head slowly. Then Officer Jenkins re-emerged from the hidden passage, her face grim. Her gaze met Michael's, and for the first time he saw genuine fear in her professional eyes. "Mr. Miller," she said, her voice strained, "we found something. Something disturbing." She paused, taking a deep breath. "It looks like a small, improvised chamber. And inside, there are more symbols scrawled on the walls just like the ones you described. And there are artifacts, personal effects, old clothes, and a collection of what appear to be human teeth, arranged in a spiral pattern on a small makeshift altar." Michael felt the blood drain from his face. Human teeth, arranged in a spiral, the symbol that had haunted him since the VHS tape. The symbol scrawled in blood on his wall, now linked to a grotesque ritualistic display. "And," Jenkins continued, her voice barely a whisper, "there's another message, carved into the wall beside the altar." She looked directly at Michael, her expression unreadable. "It says, 'The price of joining is paid in parts.'" The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. The price of joining is paid in parts. The missing mirror, the bloody message, the hidden chamber, the teeth. It all clicked into place with a horrifying finality. This wasn't just a break-in. This wasn't just a stalker. This was something far older, far darker. Something that had been festering in the heart of this cabin for decades. And the invitation "Join us" now felt less like a threat and more like a macabre promise. Promise of what was expected. A promise of what Michael himself might become. Archer. Something that had been festering in the heart of this cabin for decades. and the invitation "join us" now felt less like a threat and more like a macabre promise. Promise of what was expected. A promise of what Michael himself might become. The words echoed in the sudden, cavernous silence of the living room. Michael's breath hitched, a raw, ragged sound in his throat. His eyes, wide and bloodshot, were fixed on the television screen, which now displayed nothing but a swirling vortex of static, like a million tiny, hungry mouths whispering in unison. The VHS tape had reached its end, or perhaps its beginning. A cold dread, unlike anything he had ever known, seeped into his bones, chilling him to the core. It wasn't just the fear of death. It was the terror of oblivion, of being absorbed, transformed into another nameless echo in this cursed place. He scrambled back from the coffee table, knocking over the empty mug, the ceramic clattering loudly in the oppressive quiet. His chair scraped against the wooden floorboards, a jarring sound that made him flinch. He had to get out. Now. He lunged for the VCR, his fingers fumbling desperately for the eject button. His hand trembled so violently he could barely aim. He pressed it once, twice, 3 times. Nothing. The VCR remained stubbornly silent, the static on the screen continuing its hypnotic dance. He tried the power button on the television, then the VCR itself. They were unresponsive, as if the entire system had been seized by an unseen force. The tape was stuck inside, a dark, insidious secret refusing to be released. A low hum began to emanate from the VCR. A sound that vibrated through the floorboards and up into his very teeth. It wasn't the mechanical whir of a device working. It was something deeper, more resonant, like the cabin itself was breathing. The static on the screen pulsed, growing brighter, then dimmer, a rhythmic beat that mirrored the frantic hammering of his own heart. Then the static began to coalesce. Shapes flickered within the chaotic snow, fleeting images that were too quick to grasp, yet too horrifying to ignore. Faces, contorted in silent screams, appeared and vanished. Hands, clawing at unseen barriers. And always the same 3 words, scrawled in what looked like dried blood, flashed across the screen for a millisecond before dissolving back into the static. Join us. Join us. Join us. Michael stumbled backward, knocking into the wall, a sharp pain blooming in his shoulder, but he barely registered it. His gaze was glued to the screen, his mind struggling to process the terror unfolding before him. This wasn't just a tape. It was a living, breathing portal to something ancient and malevolent. He tore his eyes away from the television, forcing himself to look around the cabin. The cozy warmth he had felt just hours ago had vanished. The air was frigid, biting at his exposed skin. Shadows, long and distorted, seemed to writhe in the corners of the room, elongating, shortening, as if they had a life of their own. He could hear it now, to a faint whisper, like dry leaves skittering across a forgotten grave, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was the sound of voices, countless voices murmuring his name. Michael. Michael, join us. He scrambled towards the front door, his only thought to escape. His hand clamped onto the doorknob, turning it frantically. It wouldn't budge. Locked. He rattled it, pulling with all his might, but it held firm, as if bolted from the other side. He tried the deadbolt, then the regular lock. Both were jammed, unmoving. Panic seized him, a cold, icy grip that threatened to paralyze him entirely. "No!" he choked out, his voice hoarse, barely a whisper. He kicked at the door once, twice, the dull thud echoing unnaturally in the suddenly vast space. It was like kicking solid rock. He spun around, his eyes darting frantically towards the windows. Thick, heavy curtains obscured the view outside. He yanked at one, tearing it from its rod, revealing a pane of glass that looked unnervingly dark. He pressed his face against it, trying to peer into the night, but all he saw was his own distorted reflection staring back, framed by the ghostly white of the cabin. He tried to open it, pushing on the latch, but it too was sealed tight, as if painted shut by decades of neglect and something far more sinister. He was trapped, completely, utterly trapped. His mind raced, desperately searching for an explanation, a logical way out. This couldn't be happening. This was a nightmare. But the cold, the whispers, the unyielding locks, they were all too real. Then a new image flashed on the television screen, clearer than anything before. It was a brief, horrifying clip. A man, his face obscured by shadow, was being dragged into a similar cabin, his struggles weak, his pleas unheard. He wasn't dead. He was alive, aware, as he was pulled into the darkness. And as the clip faded, Michael saw it, a quick, almost imperceptible shot of the man's face, his eyes wide with terror, but also with a strange, vacant acceptance as he was enveloped. His features seemed to ripple, to become less distinct, to blur into the very fabric of the cabin's aged wood. It was a transformation, a dissolution. That was what "join us" meant. Not just death, but becoming part of this place, an eternal silent witness. He remembered Jessica and David. Where were they? He hadn't seen them since he started watching the tape. Had they left? Or had this thing already gotten to them? A fresh wave of terror washed over him, colder than the cabin's chill. He had to find them. He had to warn them. Jessica! David! He screamed, his voice cracking. The cabin swallowed his words, distorting them into a mocking echo that seemed to whisper back, "Join us." He ran to the stairs, his feet pounding on the creaking wood. He had to check the bedrooms, the other parts of the house. Maybe they were just asleep, oblivious to the horror unfolding. But even as the thought formed, a dark certainty settled in his gut. They weren't just asleep. As he ascended the stairs, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. They seemed to emanate from the very walls, from the dust motes dancing in the faint light filtering through the grime-streaked windows. He could almost make out individual words now, fragmented pleas, desperate warnings, all intertwined with the insidious mantra of "Join us." He reached the landing, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. The hallway stretched before him, an abyss of shadows. The doors to the bedrooms were all slightly ajar, like waiting mouths. He pushed open the door to what he knew was Jessica and David's room. Empty. The bed was neatly made, untouched since they had arrived. No sign of them. No note. Just the lingering scent of their perfume and cologne, now tainted by the cabin's oppressive, damp smell. He checked the other rooms, the bathroom, the small study. All empty. Deserted. A cold, hollow ache spread through his chest, replacing the burning fear. Had they escaped? Or had they joined? He stumbled back into the living room, his mind reeling. The television screen was still showing static, but now a faint, translucent image was superimposed over it. It was the cabin, but not as it was now. It was older, darker, its windows glowing with an eerie internal light. And within that light, he could make out dozens of faces, trapped within the glass, their expressions a silent testament to unending agony. They were the ones who had joined. They were the cabin. He felt a sudden, inexplicable urge to touch the screen, to reach out to those trapped souls. But something held him back. A primal instinct screamed at him to resist. His eyes fell upon the coffee table again, specifically on the VCR. The humming had intensified, and now a faint, sickly green light pulsed from its vent. He noticed something he hadn't before, something obscured by the VCR itself. A small wooden box, intricately carved, tucked away beneath the table's edge. It looked ancient, almost fused with the wood. With trembling hands, Michael reached for it, pulling it free. It was surprisingly heavy, cool to the touch. The wood was dark, almost black, and felt strangely alive beneath his fingertips. There was no latch, no visible opening. But as he ran his thumb over its surface, he felt a small indentation, a hidden seam. He pressed it, and with a soft, almost inaudible click, the lid sprang open. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, was a single tarnished silver key. It was unlike any key he had ever seen, its teeth intricate and sharp, its head shaped like a stylized, weeping eye. Beneath the key, a single yellowed piece of parchment lay folded. He picked up the key, its cold metal sending a shiver up his arm. Then he unfolded the parchment. The script was old, faded ink on brittle paper, but legible. It was a single sentence written in a spidery, unsettling hand. Asterisk, to unlock the final truth, you must first unlock yourself. Asterisk. Michael stared at the words, his mind racing. Unlock himself? What did that mean? Was it a riddle? A threat? Or perhaps a chance? As if in answer, the television screen flickered violently, and the static cleared, replaced by a single, unwavering image. It was a close-up of a locked door, a door he had never noticed before in the cabin. It was small, set low in the wall, almost hidden, and in its center a keyhole perfectly matching the weeping eye key in his hand. The cabin seemed to hold its breath, waiting. The whispers ceased. The chilling air grew still. All that remained was the low hum of the VCR, the pulsing green light, and the image of the locked door on the screen beckoning him. The final truth, the final choice, and the promise of what Michael himself might become. Michael stood frozen, the low hum of the VCR, a hypnotic drone in the suffocating silence. The green light pulsed, a malevolent heart in the darkness, and on the screen the locked door stared back, a gateway to an answer he both craved and dreaded. The promise of what he might become echoed in his mind, a chilling premonition, a pre-written destiny. He couldn't look away. The truth wasn't just behind that door on the screen, it was behind the actual door, the one standing sentinel in the very cabin room he now occupied. A shiver, colder than any he'd felt before, crawled up his spine, not of fear, but of a profound, unsettling recognition. He had seen this. He had felt this. He had been here before, or rather, someone like him had. David. His gaze flickered from the screen to the real door, identical in every detail. The same weathered wood, the same tarnished brass knob, the same faint scratch near the bottom right. It wasn't just a coincidence. It was a mirror. A perfect, terrifying reflection. A sudden, overwhelming urge, not his own, but a whisper from the very fabric of the cabin, compelled him forward. His feet moved, heavy and deliberate, each step echoing in the profound stillness. The air thickened, pressing in on him, making every breath a conscious effort. He was no longer walking towards a mystery. He was walking towards an appointment with fate. He reached the door, his hand instinctively reaching for the knob. It was cold, metallic, and felt strangely familiar, as if he had turned it countless times before. But it was locked, just as it was on the tape. He remembered David's frantic searches, his desperate attempts. Michael's own hand went to his pocket, where hours ago he had stashed the small ornate key he'd found tucked away in the old photo album. The key Emily had mentioned, the key David had been searching for. His fingers closed around the cold metal, pulling it free. It glinted faintly in the dim light, a tiny, intricate piece of brass, almost delicate, yet holding the weight of untold secrets. He slid it into the keyhole. It fit perfectly, a click of satisfying finality. The sound reverberated through the cabin, a punctuation mark on a sentence that had been building for days. He hesitated, his heart hammering against his ribs. This was it, the culmination, the moment of no return. Every fiber of his being screamed for him to stop, to turn back, to shatter the vision and flee this cursed place. But a stronger force, an insidious curiosity, held him captive. He had to know. He had to see. With a deep, shaky breath, Michael turned the key. The lock mechanism groaned, a rusty sigh, and then clicked open. The sound was deafening in the silence. He grasped the cold knob, his knuckles white, and slowly, deliberately pushed the door open. It didn't swing wide. It opened just a crack, revealing not darkness, but a blinding pure white light that spilled out, bathing Michael in its ethereal glow. He shielded his eyes, squinting against the unexpected brilliance. The cabin, the VCR, the tape all seemed to recede, becoming dim, distant shadows in the face of this overwhelming luminescence. As his eyes adjusted, he peered into the room beyond. It wasn't a room at all. It was nothing, or everything. A vast, infinite expanse of pure, undifferentiated white. No walls, no ceiling, no floor, just endless pristine light stretching into oblivion. It was utterly silent, devoid of any sound, any echo. A void yet full of light. And in the very center of this impossible space, suspended as if by an invisible force, was a single solitary object. A VCR, identical to the one in the living room, and beside it a stack of VHS tapes. Hundreds of them. Thousands. All identical. All unlabeled. Michael felt a cold dread seep into his soul. A realization so profound and so terrifying it threatened to unravel his very sanity. This wasn't a room. This was the source. The engine. The heart of the cabin's insidious truth. He took a tentative step across the threshold, into the white void. The air here was different, not cold, not warm, but utterly neutral, devoid of sensation, yet humming with an unseen energy. He felt lighter, detached, as if his physical form was dissolving, becoming part of the light itself. He approached the floating VCR, drawn by an irresistible pull. Its green light pulsed, just like the one he'd left behind. An identical tape was already inserted. He reached out, his fingers trembling, and pressed the eject button. The VCR whirred softly, and a tape slid out. It was blank, unmarked, just like all the others in the towering stacks. But as he held it, he felt a faint vibration, a resonance. He knew with absolute certainty what was on this tape. It was his story, his journey to this cabin, his discovery of the tape, his unraveling of the mystery, his moment right now standing in this endless white. The cabin wasn't just a place where a tape was found. The cabin was the tape. Or rather, the cabin was the stage and the tapes were the scripts. Each one an identical unmarked vessel waiting for someone to find it, to play it, to live it. He looked back, expecting to see the familiar living room, the VCR he had just left. But the doorway behind him had vanished. The shimmering white light stretched infinitely in all directions, a prison of pure existence. He was trapped, not in a cabin but within the narrative itself. A wave of understanding washed over him, chilling him to the core. David hadn't been trying to understand his tape. David had been trying to escape it. He had been trying to break the cycle, to rewrite the script, to find a way out of the story he was forced to live. And Emily, Sarah, they were characters caught in the endless loop, their fates dictated by the narrative unfolding on the tape. Michael looked at the blank tape in his hand. If this was his story, then what came next? What was the ending? Or was there no ending? Was it just an endless repeating cycle? Suddenly, a faint, almost imperceptible image flickered at the edge of his vision, coalescing in the pure white. It was a scene, a cabin, a man sitting in a dimly lit living room, staring at a VCR. The man looked familiar, terribly familiar. It was him, Michael, but not this Michael, a different Michael, a future Michael, or a past Michael. The Michael in the vision was older, his face etched with a profound weariness, his eyes haunted. He was holding a blank VHS tape just as Michael was now. He was staring at a VCR just as Michael had. He was trapped. And then the scene shifted. The older Michael, driven by an invisible force, began to record. He recorded the cabin, the empty rooms, the silent woods. He recorded himself speaking into the lens, telling a story, a warning, a desperate plea, a message for the next person who would find his tape. The message was clear though unspoken. The tape wasn't just found, it was made. Each victim, each seeker of the truth, became the creator of the next iteration. They were not merely observers. They were the unwitting authors, the unwilling directors, the trapped stars of their own unfolding tragedy. The immense value Michael sought, the truth he craved, was this. There was no escape, only continuation. The cabin, the tape, the cycle. It was a self-sustaining entity feeding on curiosity, on the human need for answers. It consumed those who sought to understand it, transforming them into the very mechanism of its perpetuation. Michael felt his own memories begin to shift, to blur. The faces of his friends, the details of his life before the cabin, began to recede, replaced by the persistent hum of the VCR, the image of the locked door, the endless white. His identity, his individuality was slowly being stripped away, leaving only the role. The next David, the next seeker, the next creator of the trap. He felt a profound sense of peace settle over him, an acceptance born of utter resignation. The fight was over. There was nothing to win, nothing to lose, only to become. His hand, no longer trembling, reached out to the floating VCR. He inserted the blank tape, the one that now contained the essence of his own journey. He pressed record. The green light pulsed. The recording began. It would show the cabin, the initial curiosity, the clues, the growing dread, the search for the key, the opening of the door, and the discovery of the infinite white. It would show the previous tape, the one that had led him here, now playing silently, endlessly, in a loop within the looped narrative. And it would show him, Michael, staring into the lens, his face now etched with the same profound weariness he had seen in the vision. His eyes, though, were not haunted. They were empty, serene. He was no longer Michael. He was the cabin. He was the tape. He was the cycle. He would tell the story, not as a warning but as an invitation. A subtle, irresistible lure for the next curious soul, the next unsuspecting visitor. He would leave the tape unmarked, ready to be found. The story would begin anew. The final truth wasn't about a ghost or a monster, but about the terrifying, inescapable nature of narrative itself. Some stories don't end. They simply find new protagonists. And Michael, once a mere listener, was now the storyteller, trapped forever in the endless reel. His voice echoing through the generations, a silent hum in the heart of the cabin, waiting for the next curious hand to press play. The green light pulsed. A heartbeat in the infinite white. The cycle was complete, and it had just begun.